So Mara, you are going to lead us or tell us a bit about the experience of storytelling.
Yes, I'm going to be doing a couple of different things because I think I have about 20 minutes or so, which goes by very, very, very quickly. But yes, just for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mara and I'm a storyteller. And there are not that many storytellers here in Scotland. And so it's really, really lovely to hear Mary's presentation and hearing the stories of all these amazing women who have come before me, some who have been born here, some who have come from different parts of the world, and just how fascinating their stories would be about how they got here, their experiences of being here, just how they first perceived Scotland when they arrived. So yes, I'm really excited to read the book. So I shall be buying my coffee. So yes, storytelling I'm really passionate about storytelling. And I think where storytelling for me differs to something like theatre, storytelling is that you are very much yourself the whole time that you are telling the story. Whereas with theatre, you have memorized a script that is probably written by somebody else. And the way that you deliver it, if you're doing a show, then you're telling exactly the same story time after time after time. Whereas with storytelling, because it's yourself, you're really giving of yourself to the audience, and it's a relationship between you and them. So even when you're just telling somebody a story about your experiences, it's about, this is where I have come from and these were my experiences. And the audience is also part of that relationship as well. So the story is always going to change. And if the audience is different, if it's one person in front of you, if it's a whole theater full of people in front of you, it's always going to be slightly different the way you tell it. And I thought that I would start off by telling a little story. And it's really important for us to share all kinds of stories, whether it's our own personal stories, whether it's those folk tales, those legends that we heard from our grandparents, from our parents, from our great-grandparents, because all of this, as Mary said, we are here to stay. But a lot of the time, because we don't tell these stories often enough, all of those stories get lost along the way. And stories are really things that root us to our heritage, our cultural heritage. So this is a creation story. And it's a very, very old story because it happens at the very beginning of the world. And God, when he first made the world, he started to hand out the amount of time that each living thing would have. So to the mighty baobab tree, he gave 1,000 years. And then to the tiny little fly, he gave just a few hours. So time after time after time was given out until there were only 4 creatures left. There was the human being, there was the mighty ox, there was the dog, and there was the monkey. And God turned to the human and said, "Human, your job is very important because you have to keep the balance in the world. You see, the world will always change and evolve and adapt, and you have to use your imagination, your creativity, try new things, and if you fail, try again, experiment, innovate, play, but you must keep the balance, and so you will have 30 years. And the human was very grateful. Thank you, God. And then God turned to the mighty ox and he said, "Ox, your job is also important because you must help the human. You see, the human is smart, but the human is very weak and lacks physical strength, and that is where you come in. Whenever power and force are needed, you will be there to help the human. So you will also have 30 years. But the ox, do you think the ox was happy to hear that? 30 years of hard labor? Oh, no, 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 please, God, I beg you, 10 years is enough for me." And God loved his creations, and so he agreed. But the human, being a human, spotted an opportunity and said, "Well, God, wait a minute. If ox does not want those extra 20 years, why don't you give them to me?" And God agreed. I'm going to be leaving the mathematics of this story for you guys to all figure out for yourselves, because then God moved to the dog and he said, "Dog, your job is also important because you too will help the human. You see, the human will work very, very hard during the day and has to rest and recover at night. And that is where you come in. You will stay awake and you will keep the human safe. You will guard the human's life and you will guard the human's property. 30 years. The dog was horrified. What? 30 years of sleepless nights? Oh, no, no, no. Please, God, I beg you. I just want 10. 10 is enough for me. And of course, God loved his creations. And so he agreed. And the human spotted that opportunity and asked if he might have dogs extra 20 years. And God took them and handed them over. And then God turned to the monkey and said, "Monkey, your job is also important because you too will help the human. You see, the human will sometimes have to make very difficult decisions. And those decisions are going to weigh heavily on the human soul. And that is where you come in. I want you to entertain the human, lighten the human spirit, make the human laugh. Let the human escape his problems just for a little while. 30 years. But the monkey thought, what? 30 years of being funny? Oh, no, 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 no. Please, please, please. That does not sound like fun to me. I beg you, God, I just want 10. 10 is enough for me. And again, God agreed. And once more, the human asked if they might have monkey's extra 20 years. And God agreed and handed them over. And so there are still some people who believe that our first 30 years are our true human years, where we're using our creativity and our imagination. But then we move into our ox years, where we work hard. And after that, we move into our dog years, where we have sleepless nights. We are worrying about the future. We are worrying about our children. And if we are fortunate enough to reach our monkey years, then hopefully we will have gathered enough stories to entertain everybody around us. So there you go. That is my first story for you this afternoon. Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's so nice when you see people on Zoom and they're responding, and it's really, really nice and good to see so many people here as well. But of course, I am a storyteller, but every single one of us has plenty, plenty, plenty of stories to tell. And there are lots of different ways of telling stories. Now, some people might say, oh, I'm not a storyteller. Oh, I'm too shy. Oh, I'm too nervous. Oh, I'll leave that to someone else. But the problem with that is that our story will never, ever be told. And there are lots of different ways that we can express our stories. And I thought that because this is a storytelling session, I might ask you to think about a little story of your own. As Mary had said, we don't have time to go through everyone. So I just want you to close your eyes for just a short minute. And I want you to think about something, an experience in your life that you believe has helped shape you into the person that you are today. It could be something that happened when you were a child. It could be something that happened when you were out of this country or when you arrived here. It could be something that happened last week, just something that has shaped you into the person that you are today. And when you're telling a story about yourself, you have to step into the shoes of the audience. You have to imagine what that relationship and that connection is going to mean to them as well as to you. So you think about your senses. If you can position yourself in that space, look around you and where are you? Are you in a room? Are you outside? Is it a village? Is it a town? Is it a meadow? Is it a shop? Where are you? Think of the colors that are around you, all of those things. And then leave your eyes behind and then move to your nostrils. And what are the smells that are around you? They might be flowers or nature, maybe sometimes even an unpleasant smell. Just really bring those senses to life as you begin to picture that situation. And then listen to the sounds. What's going on? What are the voices that you can hear, if any? Are there any animals or birds tweeting? Any cars that are going past? Is there traffic? Just imagine what those sounds are like. And then think about the textures. If you were to run your hands over anything that is nearby, it could be fabric, it could be the bark of a tree, it could be blades of grass, it could be skin, it could be anything at all. So try to bring all of those senses to life. And then when you start your story, when you know the story that you're going to tell, then you can really bring it to life in a way that's going to enhance it and make people really picture that they are there with you telling that story. So when you've got all this, all of these senses, and you've positioned yourself and you know where you are, then actually you feel far more alive when you start to tell the story. And then it begins to flow quite naturally because you're very familiar of where you are and what kind of story you're going to be telling. And then it's about breaking it into tiny little manageable chunks. Just think about how you are when you wake up in the morning. You wake up in the morning, you get yourself dressed, you brush your teeth, you have your breakfast, and then you go to work. But if you break it down in that sort of skeleton form, then you can add the meat on the bones. You know, you can describe about opening the curtains. You can describe about what clothes you're going to be wearing. You can describe about what you actually had to eat for breakfast that morning. You can describe how you got to work. Are you driving? Are you walking? Are you cycling? Are you whatever? All of those things. It's then just linking everything together and putting the meat on the bones of whichever story it is that you want to tell. So that is, I think, how I would break down telling a story. But it would be really nice if somebody else could share a story like this little thing here, this thing about one story that has helped shape you into the person today, a 1-minute story. Is there anybody here who is happy or comfortable sharing that story now that you've thought about it, you've felt it, you've smelt it, you've visualized it? I don't know if there's anybody. If you would like to share, please put your hand up so that we can see. I can see everybody is rushing. Everyone is rushing. Nobody at all, unless I'm missing somebody. It's not a problem. It's not a problem at all if nobody wants to share. Okay, no problem. In which case, then I shall probably just tell you a little bit more just about how I approach storytelling when I'm creating shows, when I am working with schools, when I'm going to different festivals. For me, there are different things that I think about. I think about how I use my voice. So sometimes you can slow it right down. And then other times, if you want to make it exciting, you speed it up and you begin to widen your eyes, but you're really using your voice to enhance that excitement. You also use your physicality. So you're aware of how your fingers are moving. You're aware of how your body is flowing. You're aware of even where you're standing, if you're stepping right back, if you're on Zoom, or if you come really close because you want impact. And then one of the most important is what is happening on your face. So you are widening your eyes, you're screwing up your nose, you're looking from side to side, because whatever emotion you want the person who is with you to feel, you have to show it on your face. So if you're scared, you have to show that fear, and then people will take it in. You know, when you're watching a film at the cinema or at home, and then you start to cry, you feel sad because that character on the scene is crying, and then you begin to absorb the emotions of what you're seeing. It's exactly the same thing when you are telling somebody a story. You really want to make them feel. If it's something revolting, you want to feel that disgust. If it's something joyful, you want them to feel that joy. So those are the three things that I think about when I'm telling. But ultimately, the audience is always the first most important thing of any story, and how you're going to interact with them. And then secondly, it's you and how you are, like with the little exercise about visualizing the story. You have to be comfortable, and you have to like the story you're telling, and you have to know the story that you're telling quite well, because it's never going to be the same. So sometimes you just have to chop and change quite quickly and be flexible and adaptable. And if you don't know the story, then you'll think, oh, I've lost it. I don't know where I am. And then, yeah, thirdly, it's the story itself. You really want to make sure that the story is a story that is going to be a good story, that has, you have a reason for telling that story. I'm going to finish off, because I think my time is just about done. I'm going to finish off with a tiny little story. And this story I've chosen just because we are living in very strange times. I know that there are a lot of people who have maybe not had much contact with people because of COVID. Certainly people who have been working sometimes have lost their jobs. It's just been a very difficult time for people. So this is the reason that I have chosen this story. And it's a story that was told to me by a storyteller from Sierra Leone, a storyteller called Usifu Jallo. And it's a story about two friends. One was Frog and one was Rabbit. And Frog and Rabbit were walking through the forest. Oh, they were enjoying themselves. They were laughing. They were talking. They were sharing jokes. They were singing songs. They were having the best time of their lives. In fact, they were having such a good time that they did not see an enormous hole right by the side of the road. The hole was wide and the hole was deep, and Frog, he fell in. He jumped and he hopped and he jumped and he hopped and he jumped and he hopped and he jumped and he hopped, but no matter how hard he jumped and how high he hopped, he could not get out of the hole. And his friend Rabbit was beside himself and said, Frog, I will go and get help and I will be back as soon as I can. And true to his word, Rabbit returned a little while later and he was pulling this heavy, long ladder behind him. But as he approached the hole, he saw Frog. And Frog was there on the road waiting for his friend to return. And Rabbit said, what happened? And Frog said, Rabbit, when you left, a snake fell into that hole. I had no choice. I had to get out. And that is the story. And some of you might be thinking, what is that story? But you know, a lot of these little stories, they also have a lot of wisdom. In our African cultures, we always pass down a lot of morals and a lot of wisdom in the stories. So for me, I was thinking, you know, that hole represents all the COVID time, everything that's happening in this time. And sometimes if we are that little frog and we just hop and jump, we're using the same old tactics. We're doing the same behaviors that we have always done to try and get out of any difficult situation. But actually, sometimes more problems come in. And if you keep hopping and jumping, it's not going to end well. So we have to find new ways of actually pulling ourselves out of any difficulty. So that was my interpretation of the story. If you had any other interpretation, it would be really good to hear them, and you can put it in the chat or you can share it. But I think I don't want to make the session run over too long. So thank you very, very much. I hope that you enjoyed those stories, and I hope that I'm looking forward to reading the book that's coming out. So thank you.
Thank you, Mara. That was wonderful. That was wonderful. And certainly I'm thinking about my own storytelling or lack thereof. I have two small children, one of which asks for stories every night before bed. So I'm going to work on it so that I'm actually even better at not just telling him some things that happened, but like you said, making a story about it. So thank you so much. Does anybody?
Jennifer, can I please, Mara, can you give us information about your recent book, please? Just a minute.
Yes, I'd forgotten about that. So thank you for reminding me. So yes, I did a show called Blood and Gold a couple of years ago, and it's looking at the legacy of colonialism and slavery, but I'm using myth and legend, and it's been published as a book. Not by me, which is quite nice. And yeah, it's got lots of different illustrations. I've kind of used a lot of contemporary things. So for example, there's an illustration here, and it was based on a folk tale where some of you might be familiar, where a shadow or a spirit comes from the spirit world and disguises himself as the handsome man and then crosses into the human world to steal the beautiful woman. So I took the base of that folk tale, but I actually turned it into an exploration of the police brutality in the States. So these shadows represent the police, and they fall on this young woman and they're crushing her. And so yes, I was mixing up a lot of legend, a lot of traditional stories, a lot of personal stories with current events. I also really think it's so important, this intergenerational kind of exchange, where you've got the elders are really making sure that the young people have still got some attachment to their roots. I think it's really important and really necessary. So yes, that is a copy of Blood and Gold, and it is out on the 7th of October, but you can pre-order it on Amazon and from Berlin Books, who are the publishers. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. I found that and put a link in the chat. Does anybody else want to ask questions or comments?
Oh, well.
We've got a nice interpretation in the chat from Agatha of your story, Mara. I don't know if you can see it, so I'll read it out. It says, you think you have problems with little problems until threatened by a greater or greater evil to shock you out of your pettiness.
Definitely. I love that interpretation. Yes, it's true. It's very true.
Okay, well, if no one else has anything, again, you can continue to use the chat. But right now, we just want to thank Mara very much for that wonderful storytelling and thank Mary for the earlier presentation.